Oxfam's East Africa Regional Director, Lydia Zigomo. You're very welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much.
Lydia, well, let's talk a little bit more about the numbers in this report. Now, a key finding in that report is that the number of billionaires have doubled since the financial crisis in 2008. Yet, we've seen the super rich and corporations paying lower rates of taxes than they have in decades. Meanwhile, the bottom half of the world's population have seen their wealth dwindle. So give us a sense of the numbers that are backing this report.
So some of the numbers that are quite interesting is that using the Forbes billionaire list, for instance, for March 2018, there are 2,208 billionaires around the world. The majority of those are men. 9 out of every 10 of those billionaires are men. Most of them are concentrated in the developed world, so essentially US, China and Germany, who have respectively 34%, 12% and 6% of those billionaires. So that just shows you what is happening in terms of gender, but also in terms of where the wealth is concentrated, which parts of the world the wealth is concentrated.
And what are the numbers on the lower end in terms of the poorest? They're also losing quite a number a lot of money on a daily basis.
Yes, I think for me the most striking statistics are around the fact that we have a global compact on the Sustainable Development Goals saying that by 2030, which is not very far away, we will have eliminated extreme poverty in this world, which means that there will be no longer anyone living on $1.90 per year, per day. However, unless we address the inequality gap between the rich and the poor, we will still have in 2030 200 million people living on less than $1.90 per day. On top of that, we also have from the World Bank 3.5 billion of this world's population living on less than $5.50 per day. Now the challenge with that is there are just one medical bill or a crop failure in one season. Those people will also slide into extreme poverty and find themselves on less than $1.90 per day. So the statistics are very worrying in terms of how vulnerable a huge percentage of the global population is in terms of poverty, but also particularly slipping into extreme poverty.
Now, of course, highlighting the human cost of this inequality we see globally, you talk about the fact that while huge rewards go to the top, hundreds of millions live in extreme poverty. So whose fault is it that this imbalance continues to persist?
I think what we are trying to show is that while the world economic system is not necessarily favorable to closing that gap, there are, however, things that can be done by national governments and governments as a collective to impact on that situation. It's not an inevitable, fatal situation that we need to just resign ourselves to. So our focus is particularly on the fact that fairer tax systems is one contribution to reversing this growing inequality. On top of that, we would also, of course, need other issues to be resolved, like rich countries honoring their commitments to aid that they promised poor countries, as well as tackling issues of, obviously, corruption. You've been talking about it in other parts of your program, etc. All those are necessary ingredients. But creating a fairer tax system, both nationally as well as globally, ensures that ensuring that of the money raised, the revenue raised from that, it is actually targeting the public health services. All public services will make the difference, in our opinion.
Now, some people are criticizing the report. They say inequality is real, but taking away wealth from the super rich and giving it to the poor will not help, especially when you talk about tax rates. They say the focus should be on increasing competition in different markets, as well as reducing barriers to entry. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a view, but our view is that while you can open up markets and everything else, increase the role of private sector, that in itself will not make a huge difference for the poorest of the poor, who normally cannot afford privatized public services. So basically, we are saying governments have a core and crucial fundamental responsibility to ensure that everyone in their nations has access to the basic things that we have agreed are the human rights of every citizen, which is free and universal healthcare, education, and these impact most on women and girls. As well as ensuring that we then have the right investments in things like our infrastructure, transportation, all our telecommunications, which enables people to be actually able to make the connections with each other and live in a world that is better connected and functions better for the benefit of the majority, not just the minority.
Well, I certainly wish we can delve further into the report, but unfortunately we've run out of time. But thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for your
My pleasure.
insight.